Heights, Washington Heights, Inwood, Marble Hill, and of course the Northwest Bronx. Again, this is Congressman Adriano Espaillat representing the 13th Congressional District, which encompasses the neighborhoods of East Harlem, Hamilton Heights, Washington Heights, Inwood, Marble Hill, and the Northwest Bronx. As many of you know, New York State and New York City has faced a horrible COVID-19 pandemic. As a result, many families have faced a backup in their rent payments, and many of them continue to owe their landlords substantial amounts of dollars. The state had previously issued an eviction moratorium, and the federal government also had issued an eviction moratorium. We all know that the federal eviction moratorium expired, but recently the CDC has extended it once again, allowing people to access the $2.7 billion that were allocated through the federal government, through the CARES Act, so the folks could access funding to pay their backup rent. Unfortunately, at the New York State level, the money has been slow in coming. And for that reason, we are sponsoring this forum, which is very important for tenants, for owners, for legal services providers. Saludos, yo soy el congresista Adriano Espaillat y por razón de que estamos todavía cruzando la pandemia, quería auspiciar este foro que le va a indicar a los inquilinos cómo accesar los fondos para poder pagar su retraso de alquileres. Es importante que el Estado pueda utilizar los 2.7 mil millones de dólares asignados por el gobierno federal para que las personas sean beneficiadas con este dinero de pago de renta atrasada. For that reason, I've asked a host of folks to come in to this forum. They've included, of course, our local assemblywoman, Carmen de la Rosa, also Michael Hine, the commissioner of the New York State Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance, OTDA. Also, Rahul Jain, Deputy Controller of the State of New York. Holly Martin, NYCHA Deputy Director of Policy. Yesenia Ponce from the Northern Manhattan Improvement Corporation. She is a supervising attorney there. We also have Kenneth Charles from the New York City Human Resources Administration, and like Lakeisha Morris, who's the Director of Operations from Catholic Charities Community Services. We will hear from these folks, and then we will have a question and answer discussion on topics relating to rent assistance. So first, let's welcome, vamos a darle la bienvenida a nuestra asambleísta. Let's welcome our local assemblywoman from the 72nd Assembly District, Carmen de la Rosa. Yeah.
Oh, Assembly member, your mic might be muted.
Thank you. Sorry about that. So we thank the Congressman Espaillat for putting together this forum and the wonderful panelists for bringing us together to have this conversation. It is a conversation that it is so important to have because, as we know, we are experiencing a housing crisis in New York State, in New York City for sure, and in the communities that I represent and I share with the Congressman, the communities of Inwood, Washington Heights, and Marble Hill. I think that it is imperative for our communities to have the information before them in order for them to make decisions to apply for the benefits that are brought to them, not only by the CARES Act, but also through the New York State legislature. And, we know that in this moment of pandemic, many families have experienced financial uncertainty and instability. Last week, we joined the Commissioner Michael Hines of the Office of Temporary and Disability Services at a hearing on New York State ERAP program. Thank you, Commissioner, for being with us again. And in that hearing, we looked at the challenges. We know it has not been an easy rollout of the plan and of the program, but our objective has always been to diminish the hurdles before tenants, before our constituents, to make sure that they can have access. We know that stable housing leads to stable health, leads to stable families, and that is our priority. I have called on our colleagues. I have joined many of our colleagues in calling for the extension of the eviction moratorium in New York State. It is an issue that is before the legislature, and right now we are not in session, but we look forward to coming back because we have to deal with the problems before us. And we also know that last week the Supreme Court also ruled that portions of the New York State eviction moratorium were struck down. However, we know that the CDC moratorium is still in protecting tenants at least until October 3rd. So today we're here to answer questions, to deal with the issues at hand, to make sure that the application process is one where tenants can have access to these services. And that is our commitment, to continue to work together to make sure that we can keep people in their homes. So just a few words in Spanish. Le damos la gracia a nuestro congresista Adriano Espaillat por este foro tan importante. También a los panelistas que están aquí. La semana pasada, ustedes saben que la Asamblea tuvo una audiencia con el comisionado de la Oficina de Servicios que está haciendo el programa llegar a los hogares de nuestros inquilinos y de los inquilinos de todo el estado de Nueva York. Sabemos que hay muchas familias que han experimentado un proceso muy difícil durante esta pandemia, un proceso financiero muy difícil. Y para nosotros es importante, es una prioridad asegurar que ustedes tengan la información que necesiten para que puedan aplicar para los servicios que están disponibles a ustedes y también salir adelante. Sabemos que hay una crisis de vivienda y que en esta crisis nosotros hemos hecho un llamado a continuar el programa del moratorium de desalojos para que ninguna familia experimente un momento donde tenga que ser desalojado de su hogar en un momento de pandemia. Sabemos que un hogar estable conlleva a una salud estable, a una familia estable, y eso es el objetivo de hoy, dar información para que ustedes puedan aplicar y tener acceso a este beneficio. Gracias por la oportunidad. Thank you for the opportunity, Congressman.
Thank you so much, Assemblywoman, for your service and for your commitment. As you all may know, Northern Manhattan has one of the largest concentration of rent-stabilized, privately owned housing apartments. So as a result, many of those tenants face great hardships during the pandemic, and would otherwise face eviction unless they get the kind of help that is offered through this particular program. At this point, I would like to introduce from the state agency, which is putting forward the program, the Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance, OTADOT, its commissioner, the New York State Commissioner, Michael Hahn.
Thank you so much, Congressman Espaillat, and for the opportunity to join you, as well as Assembly Member De La Rosa and other distinguished members of the panel, to discuss the critical rental assistance for our fellow New Yorkers. I'm pleased to say that New York's Emergency Rental Assistance Program is open and accepting applications. This over $2.7 billion program will provide much needed assistance, paying for past due rent and potentially prospective rent, and includes additional help paying for outstanding utility bills for eligible New Yorkers, regardless of their immigration status. Our program has received over 160,000 applications to date, and we have approved or obligated approximately $639 million for over 46,000 households. This total includes 8,300 payments we have completed to landlords totaling over $114 million. The Emergency Rental Assistance Program is designed to assist households who are behind on their rent, who've experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, and earn at or below 80% of the area median income, or $95,458 for a family of 4 in New York City, which means over 1 million New Yorkers may well be eligible. For households who are eligible, the program will cover up to 12 months of past due rent and up to 3 months of prospective rent. Plus, the program will also be able to provide up to 12 months of utility arrears to cover outstanding heat and electric bills, eliminating the worry of pending utility shutoffs. These payments will be made directly to landlords, property owners, and utility companies on behalf of eligible tenants, and all tenants will be fully notified of the amounts that were paid on their behalf. In addition to this major fiscal relief package, New York State's Emergency Rental Assistance Program also provides other significant tenant protections, because to receive these payments, landlords must agree that this payment fully satisfies all outstanding rent within the covered time period and that all late fees will be waived. Additionally, landlords must also agree not to increase the tenant's monthly rent or evict for 1 year, except under very limited circumstances. The application is available online or by phone and you can also track your application's progress anytime, day or night now, by using a computer or smartphone, keeping people well informed and greatly reducing uncertainty. The application itself has been simplified with greatly reduced documentation requirements. In fact, self-attestation is available for many of the questions on the ERAP application to help speed the process. The application is available in 9 languages, plus has the functionality to help those with hearing or vision impairments as well. You can access the ERAP application at otda.ny.gov/ERAP. That's otda.ny.gov/ERAP. For those with either technology challenges or who simply want to talk to someone directly about the program, we've partnered with New York City to provide outreach and assistance through trusted community-based organizations in every borough in the city. There are 11 community-based organizations serving New York City alone. As an additional point of contact, those who are interested can also reach out to our call center at 844-NY1-RENT. That's 844-NY1-RENT, which has extended hours for added convenience. As we all know, New Yorkers have endured profound trauma and economic stress, as the Congressman has made very clear, as a result of this horrific pandemic. And thankfully, to New York State's Emergency Rental Assistance Program is part of the solution by delivering meaningful relief during this moment of crisis, while also making sure that New York's overall recovery includes everyone. Again, Congressman, we want to thank you for the opportunity to be here today and to join everyone. And we look forward to providing New Yorkers in need the essential relief they need through the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you so much for being part of this discussion. I know that the questions are coming in the chat, but please wait until we hear from all the panelists. And Adrian from my office will ask the questions that are in the chat. Now we're going to hear, and we know that the Comptroller's Office, the New York State Comptroller's Office, headed by our good friend Tom DiNapoli, Comptroller Tom DiNapoli, issue a recent report on this particular issue. And so we have invited them to participate, and we're happy to hear from the Deputy Comptroller of the State of New York, Rahul Jain.
Hi, Rahul, you might still be muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay, that worked. Thank you, Congressmember Espaillat, and thanks to all the panelists on here as well, those listening at home. Yes, we did release a report, and I can tell you that in thinking about that, I know that what happens in the media and you focus on things we did wrong. I'd really like to focus on things we can do right and how we can do them right. And I think the people who are on this panel really have an important role to make sure we move forward. When we first looked at this, obviously there's a massive demand that we're seeing, we're feeling out there, and we tried to put some numbers behind that. We as Commissioner High mentioned, we believe there's over a million, well over a million, quite frankly, low-income rent-burden households in the state, folks who are likely to need help. And we went and looked back at the program last year, which was not done by OTDA, and realized a few things that came out of there and tried to see how we were doing now. And, from our perspective, we really wanted to focus on the program, making sure that who receives funding, right, based on the greatest need, which I think is a really key part of this, and then the pace of the disbursement of funds, which we've talked about quite a bit. And we looked at the characteristics of those who are low income and rent burden in the state in order to understand that question better. When you look at the past program, the one from last year, only 16% of those who applied for funds received them. So obviously there was an issue there, and certainly the stringent guidelines that existed before, we're stopping folks from getting funds. So what could we do better this time around? It's also notable that about 86% of funding went to the city last time. The demand was here. And if you looked at last year's program, you can see that the folks who make the least, 30% of AMI or less, and who likely need the funding the most, we're not getting the lion's share of the funding. So there was something going on there in terms of, there was a gap in terms of applying to the programs, we felt like. Commissioner High went through sort of some of the basic eligibility guidelines, so I won't rehash that. And I know we've all sort of discussed the reallocation potentially of funds at the end of September, which we all hope doesn't happen. But I do want to point out that working on the program now actually potentially provides us with the expectation that we can get reallocated funds in March for the funds the federal funds we got in March of this year. And that means if we do this right, if we move in the right direction, we can actually be allocated additional funds from other states or localities that may not use them all. And that's a good thing to consider and keep in mind. Obviously, ODOT put their last report out, about a monthly report out about a week ago. Commissioner Hine provided additional numbers, so we've upped the number, and obviously the obligated number is up over 600 million now, which is good news. One thing we sort of point out in here, and I think everybody on this call can benefit from, is additional data and information as to who's getting the funds, both who's applying and who's getting the funds, because your ability to do outreach and understand, are we getting the money to the right folks, is really going to be dependent on knowing who the people are who are getting the funds and who are applying the funds, and maybe where the gaps are. And we point out, again, what we know, which is that the low-income households, many of which are in renter households, many of which are in the district, Washington Heights, Inwood, Norwood, Belmont, just both, the southwestern portion of the Bronx and the northern portions of Manhattan are very much in need of this funding when you look at low-income and rent-burden households. The other numbers that are sort of interesting when you think about who's been affected is the industry types. So we know leisure and hospitality, certainly healthcare, some home healthcare jobs have been tough to come back. That means, again, these are areas in the same district that are highly affected by the employment situation, which we expect to continue, past whatever it is, whether it be September, October, that there's going to continue to be folks who need to come back into the job market, which is going to take some time, given where tourism and commuters are in the city. We also note that using some experimental census data, that the numbers in terms of folks in Black households in particular have come up in terms of those who have rent debt. And there's been an elevation in Hispanic households as well since May, and that's over the past 2 months. So this is kind of going in the wrong direction. We have to get ahead of that issue. As I mentioned before, I do want to highlight the kind of solutions part of this for this group. One being the data, and hopefully we do get more information here. I see Commissioner Hine nodding, so that's great news. Geography, the languages in which where people are applying, those industries, right? Obviously, to understand where the demand is. Age, which we think might be a barrier for certain types. The paper application is kind of a secondary application in this instance. Household languages, which may be limited for translatable documents or instructional translatable documents, and other characteristics that may come up. We also have kind of having more real-time data. Obviously, we have the monthly report now. We feel like that could be more robust, more quick to get out, and that'll help us understand, both the fund disbursement without necessarily asking OTDA every day or so, which I'm sure they get media requests every day on that. Updating the educational outreach materials, I think that's something that they can do, but it's also something that some of the organizations can do to help out, to kind of expand what's there and make sure we get the funding out. I really like the fact that we're all here together, because one of the things we know as a recommendation is to create the feedback loop for the community-based organizations, for the local governments, and for the agency, so that we really sort of understand where we are. We do have gaps and how we can quickly get over those to continue to get the funds out. And then, advertising the benefit, the eviction benefits protections. You have a number of protections that come from the ERAP program. You don't necessarily need a landlord to say, we'll take the money before you get some protections in place. And that's something that I think needs to be out there. In addition, outside of the program, there is the Tenant Safe Harbor Act, which was passed. And that also provides additional protections as long as there's, COVID emergencies in place. Those need to be sort of put out there to the public a bit more, so they understand the protections they have if and when they have to go to housing court. Lastly, I do note that HRA is on here, NYCHA too. I think they have a role to play in terms of leveraging the funds in NYCHA's case, and HRA maybe helping out and extending the cash assistance that can be made available to those households that need it most. And it's really nice to see kind of that rounded group here, all of whom are trying to focus on the problem at hand. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much, Rahul. Thank you so much for being part of this. And now we're going to hear from the Deputy Director of Policy from the New York City Housing Authority, who is also with us, Holly Martin. Welcome, Holly.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for having me this evening. As many of you may know, NYCHA is New York State's largest landlord, and we're committed to serving New York's lowest income and arguably most vulnerable renters. Between traditional public housing and PACT covered units, NYCHA provides affordable housing to nearly 550,000 authorized residents in over 177,000 apartments. In addition, over 88,000 families depend on NYCHA for their housing through tenant-based Section 8 program. COVID-19 has severely impacted NYCHA and the tenants who live in public and Section 8 housing. Though public housing residents and Section 8 voucher recipients can adjust their rent through the interim recertification process, public housing tenants alone have accumulated approximately $130 million in rental arrears as a result of added expenses and lost income. Funded by Congress and administered by New York State's Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance, the Emergency Rental Assistance Program was created to provide New Yorkers who are behind in rent and have suffered financial hardships due to the COVID-19 pandemic with rental assistance. NYCHA has reached out to tens of thousands of potentially eligible residents using methods such as targeted email and direct mail. All communication was translated into NYCHA's covered languages. NYCHA residents are encouraged to apply for the funding available under ERAP. To apply, NYCHA residents should visit the state's website, which the Commissioner of OTDA gave out before, but I'll repeat, otda.ny.gov/ERAP, or call 844-691-7368. Residents must complete the tenant application through the state's website or using this phone number. NYCHA staff cannot accept applications directly. If residents need certain documents, they can contact their development's property management office directly. NYCHA's property management offices can help residents by providing the following documents: rent arrears breakdown letter, NYCHA lease, income document from the most recent annual or interim recertification. Residents should have all documents on hand when they sit down to do the application and should be prepared to complete the application in one sitting. This could take up to 90 minutes. As was mentioned earlier, community-based organizations are available by borough to assist residents with applications, and I can provide a list of those CBOs to this group if that would be helpful. The state of New York is who makes the final determination as to whether residents are eligible for ERAP once an application has been submitted. And the key for NYCHA residents is after completing an application, residents must email the ERAP application number and their date of birth, along with their first name, last name, development name, and their 9-digit account number to the following email address: erap.fin, which is FIN, at nycha.nyc.gov, so that NYCHA can associate the application with its landlord account in the ERAP portal. This step is necessary to complete the application process. Once a tenant has submitted an application, a landlord has up to 180 days to complete its portion of the application. But in order to complete that landlord portion, it's critical that NYCHA have the tenant's application number on file. NYCHA is working directly with OTDA to upload documents that will meet the program's criteria while easing the administrative burden associated with the program. NYCHA will be uploading documents for the tenant application numbers that have been sent to the email address, but residents should be patient as we navigate the online portal and the program requirements. And just a note as well for residents living in PACT developments, ERAP will notify the PACT property managers when an application is submitted. The PACT partners are responsible for submitting the landlord portion of the ERAP application. PACT residents must also apply through the state's website or via the telephone number I gave earlier. And of course, I'm happy to answer any questions after everybody has spoken. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Holly. Thank you for being with us in this important conversation. And I know that on the ground, there are many not-for-profits and legal services providers that are facing great pressure because of the lack of funds available as of now for tenants that are backed up in rent. And so we have with us Yesenia Ponce, who's the supervising attorney at Northern Manhattan Improvement Corporation. Welcome, Yesenia.
For having us, Assemblymember De La Rosa and Commissioner Hine, for the opportunity to speak to our community about this very important program that is available to those who need it. As you said before, my name is Yesenia Ponce. I'm the supervising attorney at Northern Manhattan Improvement Corporation, working in the housing unit. I'm particularly focused on ERAP at the moment, and I welcome any questions at the end of this segment, not only with ERAP, but any questions on housing court that anyone may have. I'll be more than happy to try and answer them. NMIC joined the assembly hearing last week actually to express the challenges that we've been facing as an office of the usability and the accessibility of the ERAP portal. However, there have been several changes that have helped tenants in facilitating and submitting an application. So these really great changes in the past few days that we've experienced that have been really great for the community. But it has been difficult. I won't sugarcoat it. But advocates have been, expressing these challenges, and some of which have been heard. And we've been working together with, collectively together, advocates and expressing our issues with OTDA that have not gone on deaf ears. But nonetheless, even with these challenges or not, NMIC encourages the community to apply for the ERAP program. We have a hotline ready to answer any ERAP questions or any housing court questions that may come up regarding what protections a tenant is entitled to by applying to the ERAP program, but also what to expect in housing court. It's a little bit of a turmoil right now in housing court with all of the different directives and orders coming out, as well as the Supreme Court ruling last week on SEPA. So we really we welcome any questions that tenants may have, that the community may have on these issues. And I also want to make a note and remind tenants that the end of the moratorium is in fact approaching. And the sooner they get this application and the sooner an ERAP application gets filed, the more the faster you are protected. And, ERAP offers several protections for housing court proceedings that you will be eligible for. So we welcome questions of that sort to ease someone's mind when they're going through this awful situation. Remember that low-income tenants, they have the right to counsel in housing courts. So take advantage of these resources. They're available to you. And like I said, if you have any questions about housing court, ERAP, or your case in general, feel free to reach us at the hotline. We're open to the public every second and fourth Wednesday of the month, 9 to 12 p.m. And our hotline number is 929-415-8745.
Thank you, Yesenia. Thank you for being with us, and thank you for the work that you do on the ground.
Thank you.
For so many, many families. And now let's hear from Kenneth Charles, who's from the New York City Human Resources Administration, HRA. Kenneth, welcome to the conversation.
Oh, yes, there I am. Good afternoon, everyone. Congressman, thank you for inviting me, HRA, and it's nice to be on this distinguished panel of folks that we're all trying to help New Yorkers get what they need to pay for their back rent. Our HRA's one-shot deal has been in existence for a long time, as most people in New York City knows. I'm going to spend a few minutes on it's various reasons you can get one: homelessness, domestic violence issues, a lot of stuff that people don't think you can get in one-shot deal for. You can. And the number one issue with our one-shot deal program is that we don't pay prospective rent. We don't pay future rent, but we do pay arrears. There really is no monetary limit for what we pay. Situation usually dictates what we pay and how we pay. It's a 30-day process. It'll take you, the application process is now online at Access HRA. And my biggest concern that I want to tell people when it comes to the one-shot deal, always apply. Do not sit at home and self-disqualify thinking you won't get it. It's a fluid agency. We're out to help all New Yorkers that we can, and the goal is to help people, not deny people. So if you're in a situation where your rental arrears, if you think it's 8 months, 9 months, a year and a half, whatever it is, feel free to apply to HRA, especially, there are a lot of people, ERAP is, unless I'm wrong, right, for COVID, but the people whose rent was behind before that, and I encourage them to apply as well. So everyone else has mentioned ERAP stuff, but HRA's one-shot deal is alive and well. Feel free to apply, and we will be willing to help you at all costs. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kenneth. And now to finalize our panelists and to then open it up for questions, we're going to hear now from Lakeisha Morris, who's the Director of Operations for the Catholic Charities Community Services. Welcome, Lakeisha. Thank you for being with us today.
Oh, Lakeisha, you might be muted.
Oh, thank you, Congressman Espaillat, and good evening to all the other panelists here today. I just wanted to shed additional light on the ERAP program, as Catholic Charities Community Services is contracted to provide application assistance, outreach, and education to tenants and landlords in Manhattan. And I just wanted to take a few minutes to explain what documents are needed when applying for this particular assistance. So for renters, personal identification will be needed, and this can consist of a driver's license, passport, EBT benefit card, or birth certificate. You only need to provide identification for the primary applicant. The next slide would be the documents that the landlord would need. So as we all understand, tenants can apply, but landlords can also will also need to provide documentation. And that documentation consists of a W-9 form, executed lease, documentation of rent due, banking information, so that if an award is granted, it can go directly to the landlord or owner of that property by direct deposit, and property owner or authorized property management company will be required to sign.
I understand now why.
Conditions of landlord accepting ERAP is that, and this was already spoken about earlier, but there are certain obligations that a landlord would have to abide by if awards are granted. And that is that the tenant is fully covered for 1 year. They would have to waive all late fees. No increase to monthly rent will be permitted, and no eviction of household on behalf of whom the ERAP payment is made for. Housing court impact. The property owner or authorized property management company must also agree to not evict the household on behalf of whom ERAP payment is made for the reason of expired lease or holdover tenancy for 1 year from the time of the award. Exceptions are obviously part of this, but for the majority, they will be safe for an additional year. For those who will need to apply, we urge you to go to New York State Rent help.otda.ny.gov. And if you do need assistance with applying, we ask that you reach out to Catholic Charities, Community Services in Manhattan, and we'll be more than happy to assist you with your application. And again, we, Catholic Charities, is a consortium of 4 other CBOs that are also providing application assistance. And you can reach out to our hotline, and I'm happy to provide that information in the chat for you guys to get connected. And we are also happy to do trainings, workshops, forums, any type of fairs that may be happening to get applicants to apply. Thank you.
Thank you, Lakeisha. Thank you so much, and to all the panelists, all the presenters for their valuable information. I want to ask the first question and make a comment actually as well. And the question is, do we have the numbers, Commissioner, by zip code? That would really help me and my team, and I'm sure the Assemblywoman and her team, to know exactly how each of our zip codes is doing with regards to the rental assistance. That way we will be able to concentrate in those neighborhoods that have been slowed in getting their rental assistance help. And the second question that I have is, I got a notice from HDFCs that they're not eligible for the rental assistance, and I wanted to know what is the status of HDFCs. I know they're co-ops, but they're public co-ops, if you may, many of them coming from the TILT program, and those folks that reside in those apartments are not wealthy individuals or wealthy families, and they may be eligible as well to benefit from this particular funding stream. Those are my 2 questions. Access to information as to how we are doing as a district, I would like to know, particularly those districts that were hard hit by the pandemic in the north side of my district, Harlem, East Harlem, and Washington Heights Inwood. I want to know how we're doing in terms of the funding that's coming out to tenants so that we can work harder with your office, making sure that the families get the help that they need.
Well, first and foremost, again, thank you very much for having this and hosting this. We think it's incredibly important to have these conversations. When it comes to providing zip code information or zip code specific information on applicants, that's already being provided to New York City at this point. That said, there is significant additional reporting data on applicants that's coming out, demographics and a whole host of other critical information, as well as AMI, so that we're confident like it was brought up earlier, that the individuals who are being assisted truly are low income and in need. And so a lot of that data will be rolling out by Friday of this week. So there'll be significant data on that side coming out very quickly. We anticipate additional on the payment side data to roll out by the end of next week. So again, we should expect significant data across the board, both on the payment side and on the application side by the end of next week, and by the end of this week, specifically data on the application side.
We would love for you to have it on your website so that we could all have access. I know that you're giving it to the city, but if we can get that on your website and we could monitor it as we move along. What about your HDFCs?
And just to finish off that one piece, Congressman, that it will be on the state's website as well. There'll be a dashboard to be able to assist and make it easy for everyone to be able to identify.
Thank you. HDFCs?
So when it comes to co-ops in general, at this point, there's still an analysis going on, and we are trying to identify whether or not that will or won't fall under the ERAP program. I know that there were discussions early on during the budget negotiations at the state level, and they were specifically carved out of the program. But I know that there's a great deal of interest in this, and we are, again, taking a hard look at this to try to figure out if there is something that we can do administratively or if there's legislative action that is required.
We would appreciate if you could include the tenants from the HDFCs as well, as they are not wealthy or rich tenants. They're just in the same, if not a more difficult situation there. Assemblywoman, would you like to do you have a question before we start getting the questions from the general public?
We can go on to the general public. We actually had our hearing, so I had the opportunity to ask some good questions.
You have a head start. Okay, Adriano, if you could start with the questions, please.
Wonderful. So we have a bunch of questions from folks watching live on Facebook. We're going to try to go through as many as we can. And as we're going through, I'm going to ask them to the general group, and whoever would like to reply, please jump in, unmute yourself. Feel free to reply. So our first question will come from Deanna Williams. It should be up on the screen now. And the question asks, regarding prospective rent, when will applicants be advised of their eligibility if they applied in May or June of 2021?
Well, again, if they applied, May wouldn't have been an option since June 1st was the beginning of the program. But for individuals who applied during the June time period, New York State had a prioritization that was built into the law. And assuming that that individual falls under one of those many categories that are covered in the prioritization, we would expect in the very near future they will be receiving a notification. And that could happen in a couple of different ways. First and foremost, it could happen if their landlord is involved in the process, has done the landlord side of the house. And I think it's important that we note that this isn't a state mandate. This is a scenario that's been laid out at the federal level, that both landlords and tenants both need to participate in the application process. So when it comes to whether someone is going to be receiving prospective rent, if they applied for prospective rent in the process, they will receive the notification at the same time they receive the ultimate notification of whether they've been approved or not. When it comes to us taking, again, a look at how the application process can play out, one of two things can happen. And I apologize, some things are bouncing across my screen right now. Well, one of the important areas to understand, if a landlord does not participate, that doesn't mean that that tenant is somehow in a position where they cannot be approved. They can be provisionally approved, and then money is actually set aside for them. And ultimately, they receive tenant protections that can, as some of the other panelists have mentioned, last an entire year. So we expect those notifications for the individuals who have applied, been preliminarily approved, and yet are awaiting landlord involvement in the process. We expect those preliminary approvals to go out starting as early as next week.
Wonderful. Is there anybody else who would like to add into that question? Wonderful. Okay, we can move on to the next one. Thank you so much, Deanna, for your question. The next question kind of builds on what the commissioner just spoke about, and that's about time to process. So Diana asks on Facebook, what's being done to speed up the process with all of the funds being distributed, but there are still applications not being processed in a timely fashion. So that touches on a couple of other questions that other folks have asked in the chat as well about timeline. What can they expect for how long a response might take generally?
Sure. I think it's important for context on this issue as well. I think when people speak of speed, I understand when you are facing serious situations and instability in your housing, any time is too much time. And we fully appreciate that. And if there's a small landlord and they're awaiting funding to be able to pay their bills, again, there's great frustration and a great desire for everything to happen as quickly as possible. And we fully appreciate that. But again, for context here, the program launched June 1st. Okay, and there's a period of time in that prioritization in the first 30 days where it's virtually impossible to make payments in that process. And now we're beginning to roll out payments. First payments went out on July 19th. We're now, I think, at $114 million, and those dollars are continuing to roll out on a regular basis and ramping up. The question really talks about what are you doing to speed the process up? The first thing you can do is make it easier to apply. And so that's, again, only the primary tenant is now required to show proof of identity. Prior to that, it was everyone in the house. Landlords are no longer have to provide proof of ownership of their property. That drastically reduces time on the landlord side. OTDA developed an expedited application review process so that as we're reviewing them, we're speeding the process. And add to the 1,000+ individuals who are doing the eligibility determinations, we have added 350 additional state staff. So all of those things collectively are making a fundamental difference in speed and allowing us to roll out dollars effectively. I would highlight one thing. When comparing state to state, other states began virtually immediately in the February timeframe, March timeframe, because they adopted simply the federal guidelines and were able to move forward with those guidelines as their marching orders. But the reality in this situation is New York did something really extraordinary, and really a tip of the hat to everyone who was involved in the process. There is some of the strongest tenant protections in the nation in New York State, specifically because additional legislation was passed in the state budget. The offset to that is that state budget was passed in early April. And so that meant there was a delay in that process. So yes, there was a delay, but it's also important to note that huge benefits have been brought forward to tenants in New York because of that.
Wonderful. Thank you so very much for answering Diane's question. We'll move on to another one of the many questions we have, and we're going to stick to one answer per question, just so we can get through as many as we can before the forum ends tonight. So the next one we'll go to is Vevel on Facebook. They say, understandably so, that they can't keep paying the rent much longer. How can I get future help as well? I'm currently up to date on my rent, but I don't think I will be for much longer. So whoever feels as if they could answer this one, go ahead and jump right in.
I don't mind answering it all. So let's see if I can help in the situation. First and foremost, again, I'm concerned about this individual. Obviously, they're struggling to be able to pay rent going forward, and that's a serious issue. The ERAP program, the way it was designed in legislation, requires there to be past due rent or rent arrears before there can then be rent going forward, or what's called prospective rent. So it wouldn't be the ERAP program. That said, reaching out directly to HRA and other New York City programs, they exist specifically to provide assistance to people who are in moments of crisis exactly like this. Again, OTDA oversees local social service districts all around the state. So there are programs designed specifically to be able to provide help and keep people stably housed.
And what we usually do is connect them to some other CBOs as well. Yes, we do that. Yes.
And also, if I may add, this tenant may be available, may be eligible for other subsidies, such as FAPS or city FAPS, or other assistance that the city provides, the state provides. So
I put my number on in the chat on live. He can call me at that number tomorrow.
There you go, to find out
Yes.
more information.
Exactly.
Wonderful. Thank you guys so much. So we'll head on to our next question. We had quite a few questions about this, and it may have been touched on before, but I think folks would love it if we could touch on it one more time. And this one is from Fafa on Facebook, but there are many others like this comment that say there's the June 1st application and no word yet. Is there any way to track the application status that folks should know about?
Two perspectives here. First and foremost, again, I appreciate the frustration that comes with a June 1st application and no word yet. We have to be real about this. That is an extended period of time for someone to have the frustrations and concerns awaiting some sort of answer in the situation. So on the good news front, I will tell you there is a significant improved tracking system now available, up and operational on the OTDA website. So we encourage you to be able to utilize that, and you should be able to get a very clear understanding of where the situation is. That said, if a decision has been made, they'll be, we also, and your landlord has not participated in the process, we're not going to allow that to delay and cause you additional frustration. Again, we expect those notices to be going out as early as next week, which should provide you answers.
Wonderful. Thank you so very much. So it looks like we're going to have time for around 2 more questions. So we're going to go through a couple more through the chat here. We have another one from Leanne on Facebook. So I'll throw it up on the screen here for everybody. She says, I'm a mother of 2 kids and I live with my mother at the moment and we don't really have enough space. I'd love to know if there's any program that I can apply for to help me with both paying my rent and getting a new apartment.
Could you repeat that question, please?
Yes, of course. So this one comes from Leanne on Facebook. And her question is, she says that she's a mother of 2 kids and lives with her mother as well at the moment. She says they don't have enough space, but she would love to know if there's any program that she can apply for both to help paying rent and to help getting an apartment going forward.
As I said before, my number's there. I don't really want to discuss people's personal information, but if she gives me a call tomorrow, we can walk through it. I can get a better feel of how I can better help her.
Wonderful. I will re-up your contact information in the
Yes,
chat.
please do. Yes.
So
And for those who don't get their questions asked, if it's an HRA issue of any magnitude or minitude or whatever you want to call it, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm totally there to help you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay, so we have another question from Nadia on Facebook, and I'll throw it up on the screen here so everybody can see it. Her question is, can you apply for back rent still owed after you've already moved out of your residence that you were renting before?
Again, a great question, and it's a question that we get a great deal. The reality is the way ERAP was structured, it was designed to be able to stabilize people's housing situation. And so with that as the fundamental of the program, it only applies to where you are currently living at this time. So unfortunately, in this case, it would not cover back rent where someone has already moved out of the residence.
Understood. Thank you so much for clarifying that for us. So I think we'll have time for, one more question. So I'll go through the chat here. And we have one more question from Richard, and I'll throw it up on the screen for everybody to see. His question is, by being in arrears, does that stay on your records or affect in any way future applications for rent for another apartment?
In terms of?
I think the question was more so general about does being in arrears because of COVID-19 and all of this going on going to negatively affect future applications that they might send out for apartments in the future?
Not that I'm aware of, but
So
on this panel.
I may be able to answer that. Before, there wasn't a law per se that prevented blacklisting of people who had judgments in housing court. So that may have affected their applications in the future for housing. However, now that is not supposed to be the case. But we are not clear. There is no real clarity on how that law is enforced. So if I may suggest, if someone had a judgment or any kind of stipulation in court that they were sued for arrears, my suggestion is to have that stipulation ready, proof that it has been paid or discontinued. And if the future landlord or in the application, it asks for that specific information, you are ready, willing, and able to show that you no longer have that judgment with you or on your record.
Very good. Very good. Thank you. I have one last question that I read in the chat, and I thought it was important because I think it may be happening in many neighborhoods across the city of New York. What happens when a landlord refuses to cooperate with the tenant? Perhaps the landlord wants to evict the tenant or get rid of the tenant so he can hike up the rent or get someone else to live in the apartment and speculate with the apartment. What happens when that is the case?
Congressman, that is a perfect question. And the reality is we're getting a number of situations like that all across the state. And the reality is very simple. If you apply as a tenant into the ERAP program, obviously immediately you are shielded from eviction throughout the entire eligibility determination phase.
Very good.
If you are then approved or preliminarily approved, is what we say, pending landlord engagement, and the landlord never engages, New York has an extraordinarily strong law in this scenario. First and foremost, we hold money to the side for an extended period of time and look to identify and pay that particular landlord to make sure the tenant's rent arrears are covered. But if that landlord continues to not accept or participate in the process, ultimately after a year, the rent obligation of that tenant is wiped away. So there will be no arrears for that tenant. And at every step of the way for the entire year, they are shielded from eviction. So it's important to understand the tenant protections that exist in New York state law are extraordinarily strong.
I do want to make a very important clarification to that statement, Commissioner. Just the arrears that ERAP covers in the protections only apply to everything after March 2020, March 17th, I think, and March 13th. But right, so that if the tenant has arrears that were unpaid and that have been unpaid from before March 2020, and the landlord is refusing to be involved in the application process for ERAP, that tenant there is not protected from eviction from arrears prior to March 2020 that haven't been paid. So there's just certain aspects of every case that need further inspection, right? It's a case by case analysis, and I wanted to make a point. Thank you.
Yes.
And can I piggyback on both of those that are at the HRA end of it? We want anyone who has been rejected because of source of income, because source of income or discrimination, please let us know if a landlord does not want to cooperate with the fact that you're getting money from a FEPS voucher or any other of our programs, because we need to know that, because we have gotten convictions on landlords for refusing to rent out to people who had FEPS money.
Thank you so much. I want to thank all of you for being part of this forum. It's such an important forum. We'll do it again as we get closer to that October the 3rd date where the CDC eviction moratorium is set to expire. But we're very hopeful, Commissioner, that we'll be able to get that data, that information that will give us the know-how on how to approach this and to concentrate on neighborhoods that have been falling behind. It will be a great help. And of course, also if you could include the HDFCs, that will be an added help to many families in the district. Thank you all for being part of this discussion. Assemblywoman, if you want to have some parting words.
Thank you, Congressman, and to the panel, to the commissioner, and everyone on here. Yeah, it's important for us to just have this information on our hands and make sure that our constituents are able to access the service. I thank you for the efforts in order to save our communities from further eviction. We all have to work together. So I appreciate the opportunity. And also, if there are constituents who live in Upper Manhattan who want to reach out to us, feel free to call our office, 212-544-2278. The Congressman and I are working together to assist tenants in Upper Manhattan. So thank you so much.
In addition to Carmen's, you can visit my office on 181st Street and Bennett Avenue. You can visit my state office building office on 125th Street and Adam Clayton Powell Boulevard on the 5th floor. You can also call my number at 212-663-3900. Again, 212-663-3900 for additional help. I want to thank all of you for being part of this discussion. God bless you and keep the faith.
Thank you so much.